Today, we're going to go into some tangible action steps in regards to supporting you in keeping the body healthy to allow the nervous system to regulate effectively, for the emotions to pass a little easier. I'm not going to say it's always going to be easy, however, to support that as effectively as possible. So if you're interested in hearing some actionable things to do, this episode's for you. Welcome to the 5th episode of Ember in the Dark. I'm your host, Mike Wharran, and today we're getting into some actionable things that you can start implementing or practicing to see if they support you in helping get the emotions moving again and up and out to clear out, as well as potential change in behaviors and habits that align with creating the new version of you and what we talked about in the episode, letting go of the old version or grieving the old version of you. And so it's a way to start moving and inching forward. This is not an overnight thing. You do what I say in this video today and expect a major result tomorrow. It is something that you just take a chunk out every single day with some consistency to the best of your ability, and over time it will support you. And so what I'm going to talk about around this is all geared towards your nervous system, okay? And different ways to approach it. However, ultimately, what I'm talking about is getting the nervous system from fight or flight, or your sympathetic, into your rest and digest, or your parasympathetic. And when we're in parasympathetic, we have the capacity to experience more, handle more, deal with stress easier, as well as emotions are able to flow more effectively. And the best way I can describe this as an analogy, if we were to go back to hunter-gatherer times, and a bear showed up in the village or in our tribe, we have two options. We fight or we run. And whatever we decide to do after that experience, the nervous system goes from adrenaline, sympathetic, and then flips back to parasympathetic, where we can relax, enjoy, the threat is gone, things are good again. Now, we fast forward back to today. Unfortunately, our bear looks a little different. Our bear is built. Our bear is, challenged with getting work or finding work. Our bear is, what we see on the world news, social media. Like, it's a constant push on fear, stress, overwhelm, such that the nervous system is constantly in fight or flight. Now, what happens is when we're locked into fight or flight for a long period of time, the nervous system goes, well, I've attempted to run, I've attempted to fight, and I'm still dealing with this stress and I'm not able to get away. So my next thing is to prepare to die, essentially. I know that's a little grotesque, however, that's what the nervous system thinks like. It's very absolute in those ways. And so what happens is it really starts to shut down, and our experience of reality becomes one that's very disassociative, as well as it may seem like reality isn't as real. We are very numb. And the reason for that is the nervous system wants to ease the process of death so much that we experience as little of it as possible. So it is supporting us, because to the nervous system, it seems as though we are dying. And like I spoke about in the last video around grief, a version of you is technically dying in regards to thought patterns, beliefs, habits, emotions, all of that. And a new version hasn't arisen yet. And so we tend to kind of stay with what we know because it's comfortable, even though the situations are not comfortable. And so the nervous system is being stressed and overwhelmed with whatever's going on in your life, plus the emotional experience of said things, that it starts to close down, shut down, and that gets us into what we call a fawn or freeze state. And so what I'm going to be talking about to support you today are things that help get the nervous system regulated and not spike it or cause it to flare up into a fight or flight or fawn freeze state. Okay. And so first thing I'll speak to is diet. Okay. Played with many diets and been committed to many diets: carnivore, raw, vegan, fasting for 40 days, cut out sugar, alcohol, grains. Like, I've played with it all. And what I recognized is that was a cleansing process for me. However, it got so bad for me in my amount of fasting that I was actually damaging the body. And so I had to really let go of this idea of fasting and only eating fruits and veggies as a spiritual thing. There is a factor in that. However, it does lead to, it is a form of gluttony, I'll put it that way, where the fasting and the form of diet is a form of gluttony when the physical body becomes too weak. And I didn't see that until I would say about 2 months ago, reading the book of Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross. And so the diet is important because what we're putting into the body can cause inflammation. And when we have inflammation in the body, that's stress on the body. When we have stress on the body, that's sympathetic in our nervous system or fight or flight. And so we want to minimize those as much as possible. And so if you are somebody today who is kind of eating whatever and you haven't really cared too much about your diet, I'm going to say start with something simple. And the two things I recommend with anybody that I'm working with that want to make changes with their diet, two things I always recommend is alcohol and sugar. To eliminate those from the diet. And at first, I recommend just commit to 30 days. And the reason for that is if you've never cut out sugar for 30 days, it's kind of been in our diet for, for me, it's been in my diet prior to this for, 30 plus years. So I've never experienced a full month of no sugar. And so when I made that choice, after about a week, I'd say the first week wasn't so bad. The second week was a little rough, a lot of withdrawal symptoms, as well as detox symptoms as the lymphatic system started to clean up and move a little more regularly because it wasn't as inflamed. With the nervous system inflammation, so things can start to move more effectively. Then it got really smooth. And so to celebrate day 31 when I completed no sugar, and just to note, if you go for fruit and natural sugar, that's okay. That's what I did. And so day 31, when I went back, I'm like, I'm going to celebrate this. I'm going to have my favorite chocolate bar. Took a bite, and that was as much as I could have because it was super sweet. I never realized how sweet it was. And what I also recognized is fruit started tasting like candy and vegetables started tasting like fruit. And I recognized that my taste buds had been so desensitized with the intensity of sugar in just regular chocolate bars that I always needed more sugar, more chocolate to increase the flavor or increase the dopamine hit. Right? So something to look at is if you're going to make some adjustments to your diet and not go from 0 to 100, I would recommend starting with sugar and alcohol. Just those two things, right? And anything with sugar, so your pastries and some of your breads, etc. Okay? And the reason for that is when you intake sugar, one aspect is the same parts of your brain fire and light up as if you had ingested or taken cocaine or heroin. That's an addictive side of sugar. The other aspect of it is it causes inflammation throughout your entire system. And so we want to negate the amount of inflammation because inflammation equals stress, stress equals nervous system in the sympathetic side. Okay. And another aspect of it in regards to just general overall health is having the sugar intaked into your body within, I believe, about 15 minutes, your white cell production actually decreases and you're now more susceptible to sicknesses and illnesses. So there's a lot of benefits in eliminating sugar alone. However, for this dark space, this dark night of the soul, just eliminating that sugar alone will help regulate the nervous system because I get it. If we're experiencing the depression and the ruminating thoughts and the looping thoughts and constant overthinking and just sitting in our stuff and not able to move or do anything, that alone gets the nervous system fired up. Especially if there's a lot of heavy emotion that is sitting right underneath that we're not allowing to be released, either by thinking about them or making up stories as they come up that they never really get released. We just kind of replay them over and over again. So regulating the nervous system will allow it to flip to that parasympathetic where we can actually sit with the emotion and not be drowned out or overtaken by the emotion such that we can observe it in a way that we don't need to attach a story to allow it to pass through because the nervous system is healthy and allows for us to have more capacity in our experience of life and self. And so that's why if you're experiencing, like I was saying, the dissociation where reality doesn't feel real, kind of weird things like that, that can be a sign that the nervous system is dysregulated. So diet-wise, just to start out simple and keep it easy, because again, if we go too hard, we're going to stress the system even more. So I would start with sugar, and if you drink, maybe reduce your alcohol intake. Okay. And next one I would look into is potentially some gut cleanses or healing and sealing of the gut. And the reason I say this is, looking into the gut brain axis, because when we are in the womb developing and at the stage where the nerves are being developed, doctors can look and they will see a bundle of nerves with a big nerve in between and another bundle of nerves. And at that stage, the doctors are unable to tell which bundle of nerves will turn into the brain and which bundle of nerves will turn into the gut. And there's a lot of research and studies coming out now that, essentially your mental health is equated to your gut health. And so in this space, I've done a lot of research and a lot of cleanses and gut cleaning and certain diets and foods. Did it help me? A little bit, but I also recognized that this process is a deeper purging process, and it was me going external. However, it did support in the inflammation. It did support in allowing the nervous system to relax a little bit. Because if the gut is out of whack, that big nerve that runs from the gut to the brain is your vagus nerve. And with your vagus nerve, when that is dysregulated, and that can be caused by inflammation in the gut, or any of the other factors that I had mentioned, that we can experience that as anxiety, depression. And so looking at some ways to heal the gut, okay, taking your probiotics, prebiotics, monitoring anti-inflammatory or monitoring the inflammatory foods that you will intake. One that I've avoided is for some breads, like whole wheat, rye, white bread, the research I've done on that, it's like a lawnmower going through your intestines and cutting everything up. If you want a healthy bread to ingest, my recommendation would be farmer's market sourdough bread. Sourdough has some fermentation in it. The wheat aspect of it isn't as harsh, and it's actually good for the gut. And I noticed any times that I would eat poor bread, and I would eat a lot of it because I'm just hungry and in my one of my moods of depression, and I don't care, it's all going to end anyways. I would eat a bunch of bread and I would crash even harder. I never realized how much the bread would affect me. However, I could eat just as much bread of sourdough and it wouldn't affect me. So start looking into the gut health, because that can help facilitate the mental health a lot more effectively. Another one is to support the physical body of somatic healing or somatic movements. And these are movements that are gentle to the body, that allow the nervous system to relax and allow the nervous system to be able to get into that parasympathetic state or start to thaw out from the freeze state to allow the emotions to start moving again. The beautiful thing about this is, for me, I didn't have any energy to move the body. I've had friends tell me, you know what, you need to start getting up early and get to the gym and start working out. And I would tell myself, I agree, I need to start doing something. However, there was no capacity for my nervous system to do that. Like, I had no energy, and it was like I couldn't even care to do it. I wanted to. However, I don't care if I get to the gym or not. Like, it's hopeless and pointless. And so the beautiful thing with the somatic work is it's very gentle, and you can do it in your bed. You could do it on the floor, whatever works best for you. And it's very light, very simple movements. You're not going to break a sweat. That means you're doing too much. It's designed to do as little as possible, such that the body starts to feel safe again, such that the nervous system can kind of go back to parasympathetic. It's kind of like, someone that's been scared or hurt and they run and hide, and then they're slowly starting to peek out to see if it's okay. We have to be the facilitators of that with our body in this process. And so being in a space of depression, anxiety, those overthinking, ruminating thoughts, all of those deep emotions, as they're being brought to the surface and we're stuffing them down or putting stories on them, not allowing them to pass through or allowing them to pass through, and getting overwhelmed, like the craziness, don't know left from right and up from down, is heavy and taxing on the nervous system. So somatic healing is a way that you can move the body gently, and it actually allows the nervous system to real time relax, and behind that allows emotion sometimes to creep up. So there have been times where I was doing the practice and I would start to feel sad, which is a good sign, because it means that the sadness that has been stuck in the body has now begun to move. And like I spoke in my previous episodes, we want to get that emotion moving again and up and out to clear out, because it's like carrying around a 40-pound backpack for 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years. So the body gets overwhelmed and tired. So I would look into some somatic healing. One I would play with is meditation. However, if you find the thoughts are overwhelming and it's very difficult to sit in meditation, then I would maybe hold off on that for the moment, because it can actually keep the nervous system firing simply because it is too overwhelming. And what I mean by that is, when I was experiencing my connection, deep connection with spirit, I was meditating anywhere from an hour to 2 hours a day. And it was a beautiful, amazing experience. I've heard music, balloons popping. I've been able to move within myself, like as real as I see myself here in real life. I was able to move like that within myself. However, anyone looking at me, just a guy sitting in the closet meditating. Right now, having been in this dark space, I go into the meditation and I'm not having those same experiences. So now I'm freaking out even more. I'm thinking more. The mind isn't able to calm down as much. The nervous system is even more jacked up, and thus it creates more stress on the body. And so if you are able to sit in meditation, I recommend it. Absolutely. One of the best things you can do to release stress and calm the nervous system. However, if it is too stressful when you're in meditation, that the mind is too busy, too crazy monkey mind, whatever you want to call it, that can cause actually more stress on the body. And maybe it's just a matter of, staring at a candle. That's a form of meditation, not a closed eye meditation, right? Or maybe just doing some of the somatic work as a form of meditation, as a moving meditation. So different ways to support the body in getting the nervous system regulated. Another one is, journaling. Great way to get your emotions out. Don't know how many journal entries I've made writing to God. Where are you? What have I done wrong? Again, that's me attaching to the story. However, that's where I was at that time, was just for a form for me to get the information and what's going on inside out. And sometimes we're not able to communicate it. So the best thing we can do is just write it out. And it's kind of like a free writing experience. So no judgment, just write. And you start out with kind of thinking, and then you just write and write and write. And eventually it kind of takes over and you have written something out. And if whatever you decide to do with it after is completely up to you. So these are some things that I've practiced and have implemented. Acupuncture, again, is another big one. Reiki, these are all great tools that can support. However, again, that was my part of the denial, talking about that grief step, the first one of being in denial. I was going to these things, specifically like the Reiki and the acupuncture, to fix something wrong with my physical body, because I didn't want to deny that I was in this space. I was denying that I was in this space. And so my suggestion or disclaimer would be that don't approach the somatic work, for example, or eliminating the sugar, for example, as a thing to do to get out of this space, because then you're still looking externally to fix and correct or make right. And again, to remind you, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. You're healing. It is a process, right? So there's nothing wrong with you. There is just a cleaning house. Things that have been not working, things that have been ineffective in aligning with your authentic self are coming to the surface to be cleaned out, such that they have no more weight or bearing on you in moving forward with your life. Imagine having an identity that you've been attached to for, 10, 20, 30 years, whatever your age is. And not that that identity is wrong or bad. However, there are aspects of that identity that are ineffective. And when those identities are kind of flavoring your experience. If we're making a soup or a cake, those aspects that are ineffective are still in the flavor of whatever you're making. And your intention might be to make a vanilla cake. However, those aspects are flavoring it with some chocolate. And you never get the vanilla cake you want, because the vanilla cake is your authentic expression of what you want to create. And so this process is to bring those things to the surface such that we can release and let them go. So going to the somatic work, going to cleaning out the sugar, going to meditation as a way to get away from or change where you are at will only deepen it. And I'm speaking from my personal experience because that's what I did for about 3.5 years. I looked at everything I could do to get myself out of this space because I didn't want to accept and surrender to it. And that's what we're going to start talking about in the next episode, is the acceptance and surrender journey, as well as some forgiveness, because it's all part of that same process. And so if you are finding value with this, my hope is that you share, like, comment, follow, subscribe, whatever it is for you. At the end of the day, I do hope this finds some person to support, because if you are listening to this, I will always say this: you are heard, you are seen, you're not alone. I've been there. I feel as though I'm coming out the tail end. There was a time I would not be able to do this podcast and be able to communicate to you the way I am in this dark space, and now here I am. So I know something has shifted. And so if something has shifted with me and the hell that I've been in, I know something can shift within you. Don't give up. God, source, spirit will never give up on you. It's just taking it day by day. And as always, no matter how dark it seems to get, even the smallest of embers can light your path. And my hope is this podcast is becoming that ember for you.